I just wrapped up a pretty lucrative and bombastic play session of Splatoon Raiders. I've really hit a stride with the game. I figured out my builds, my play style, the mechanics, and I'm getting comfortable with the controls. And I have never been more successful in this game. Because I gotta be honest, I don't remember things going so well at the beginning. And it has me reflecting on my humble beginnings when I first started the game. The other secret is that I played the first hour of the game again for some footage, and I've realized what was going on back then. Okay, so Splatoon Raiders, you're a helicopter pilot taking deep cut from Splatoon 3 to the Spiralite Islands. I might have mispronounced that, it's okay. We're just gonna call them the Spiralite. It sounds... wait, I can check the trailer, hold on. Yep, it's Spiralite. There's like an H in there, and I'm not really sure what the H is supposed to be doing. Does that change the pronunciation? But English. It's a funny language. And when you get there, you crash land because of some fancy tornado storm thing. So it's a nice mixture of you're stranded here, but also you came over here for treasure anyway. And I do like that mix because the characters have to get a little scrappy. The vibe is a mix between tropical getaway and also we're fighting for our lives kind of deal. And it fits the tone of the game quite well, especially with salmonids, those guys. Even the developers agree with me. Salmonids are a little wacky, a little outlandish, and that goes for everything they touch. Some people were saying it affects the music a little bit too much. The music doesn't get to be anything too remarkable and memorable, at least until Deep Cut gets in there. But everything else about the setting, I'm a big fan of. The first couple of levels, tutorials. Makes sense. But not just tutorials for us, also tutorials for the characters. That's how they find the exploration bot. That's how they find the tanks that the mechanic uses throughout the game. The mechanic is you, by the way. You are the helicopter pilot and the mechanic. You just do everything. Jack of all trades, the squid or octo. And I'd say the tutorials work pretty darn well. There's not too much going on, but it teaches you all the essentials of the game. You know exactly how to play this when you're done with the tutorial session. But what makes a good tutorial great is when it's a self-contained little demo of how the rest of the game will be. Think of the Great Plateau in Breath of the Wild. You've got to limit the player so they don't run off and get lost before they're able to understand the basic gameplay loop. But when you finish the Great Plateau, you realize that the rest of the game is basically the Great Plateau, but on a larger scale. And that is extremely exciting for the player to think, oh, all that I just did, I get to do it more, but better and bigger. For me, at least, that's one of the best sensations a tutorial can give me. Raiders, though, does a little bit of a slip-up. Salmonids, check. Weapons, check. Toolkit specials, collectibles, general gameplay loop, check. But one thing I was really excited for as I wrapped up the tutorial was all of the platforming. There are these things called spring stalks, and they have heavy presence in the game. They are these tall green plants that when you jump next to them, even if you're in the air, you will fly up and sort of float casually back down to the surface. Very cool for platforming, and early on in the tutorial, you are jumping over death pits using spring stalks. You learn how to use the bot hop, which allows you to get to high ledges and far locations basically whenever you want. And there's a couple of secrets that you explicitly need the bot hop for to jump off that bot and get up there. And there's nothing valuable in the tutorial, but like I said about tutorials, you're sitting there imagining what kind of secret ledges we're going to be finding in the main game. And one more thing to add is that the tutorial is pretty brisk. It does the minimum you need to understand all of the mechanics that you'll be using. And then you're just let loose to go into the world. And one of the things I really like about Splatoon Raiders is you are pretty much allowed to go anywhere. That's usually one or two locations, but the game has no concern with you skipping levels, trying levels that you're way under-leveled for. At the end of every major area, there's a dungeon you tackle, and when you beat that dungeon, more areas open up. And the loop just keeps going like that. So as long as you finish those dungeons, those locks, you can do whatever you want. And the first couple of levels are fine. They introduce scrolls and compasses. The scroll is just flavor text, basically, and scrolls have been around in basically every Splatoon. They're hidden collectibles that you can find by, exploring. But the compasses are directly how you find the samplers, which we will talk about later. And you've got one of these collectibles on a side island. There's another on an island that's too far to make a normal jump, so you have to use a bot hop. There we go. Nice. There's a couple more on hidden paths. So far, so good. They aren't that complex, but early levels isn't really that big of a deal. But then you keep playing the game, and we start doing the same thing again. Oh, there's a crate with a scroll. Just take a right. And I do mean just take a right. You turn right and it is right there behind a wall. So it's hiding technically, but not very well. And then the game does it again. And then we get another pretty well hidden one. And then we get another easy one. And another well hidden one, at least somewhat. And then 2 more easy ones. And this all bubbles up to Kerma lava flows, where the scroll is slightly off the path, not really. I guess you could make an argument that it is sort of hidden, but then the compass is directly in your line of sight as you play the level. I don't think it's possible to play this level and not manage to grab the compass, unless you're just trying to annoy me. Oh, look at me, I did it without the compass. Okay, that's great. You're doing it for attention. And I'm not just complaining about secrets here, because a lot of these levels don't do much with their level design. There's usually some mechanic being tested, but only one. And barely at that. Well, would you look at this? Kerma lava flows again. It's all about ride rails. And these are the easiest ride rail segments I've ever seen. And if this was the only time this happened, okay, that's one thing. But throughout the game, you've got levels, raids, that have some mechanic that is utilized to a pretty basic degree, and then we don't see it again, or very minimally see it again. Spring stalks are probably the most extensively used environmental mechanic, and even they aren't used that well. I think Seesaw Mountains uses them pretty well, and that's probably my favorite level in the campaign. But Kerma Lava Flows is the most in-depth that ride rails are used in the entire game, and plenty of the other Splatoon campaigns do it way better. And as I started looking into it, replaying a couple levels here and there, yeah, this is a consistent problem. Tunya Glacier introduces this new ice float mechanic, and it's used 3 times for some mildly beginner platforming, and we never see it again. Crimpuff Cave reuses fish stick pillars as an ice pick, and it breaks open passages in a cave. It's a cool idea, but we only ever use them one after another in a linear hallway with maybe one side path, that's it. It's basically a visual flair to give this level a unique identity, but isn't used for any unique gameplay interactions unless you're trying to skip all the combat segments in the level. They block you from running through everything. But other than that, they don't do anything unique. Chocolate Iceberg has a secret metal pillar. There's no compass, there's no scroll there, but it takes some complicated platforming to reach it, and when you do, a couple squid rings show up, and you get some unique dialogue from the characters. So it's an intended secret, but we couldn't put any of the actual collectibles in this intended secret. It's one of the best secrets in the whole game. And I think the most illuminating example is in the Carbonara wetlands. No, you're not crazy. These levels are all named after food. So at one point in the level, there's a hidden side path on the left that leads to an island using one of those surfboards. Surfboards allow you to cross water because squids can't swim for whatever reason. This is intended to be a hidden secret path, and we know this because Big Man, one of the characters, confirms it with some dialogue. Well, you get on that surfboard, and it takes you straight to the other island, no frills, and the collectible's right there. So we know the developers want to put secrets in this game, but for some reason, we can't get anything too in-depth. Surfboards have an interesting mechanic in that they will go forwards until they beach on some sand or a surface somewhere. And very occasionally in the game, you could go around an obstacle and keep going forward. So why don't we have any secrets where you have to purposely navigate the surfboard away from the shore, maybe hop between some puddles or ponds? And if you can avoid beaching the surfboard for a little bit, you go through some fog and it reveals that there's a hidden island all the way back here. Such a simple idea, and the game never does it, even though we have secrets where you do have to get on a surfboard to get to. And if you play this game and you're thinking, well, you could just use one of the speed gadgets to cheese it and get over there without using the surfboard, I don't think that's a point against it. I think that's actually a point in favor of it, because you don't have to do the crazy convoluted setup to get to the secret. If you're creative and you notice a way to use some of your other moves in your toolkit, you can just use that instead. Part of me wonders if the developers are worried about speed being too useful, and it makes the other two tanks in the game, power and tactical, seem less useful because they can't reach those secrets. But I don't think that's what the evidence points towards. So there are areas in the game that feature exquisite, expertly crafted level design. And those are the samplers that I mentioned earlier. They are great, I have to admit. There's one surf and turf that uses the surfboards to more or less their fullest extent. There's still a problem though, there's no secrets in this sampler. None of the samplers really have secrets. They're all pretty linear, though that is something I noticed ever since Octo Expansion. A lot of the levels themselves have been linear. Splatoon 3, the levels are linear with no secrets pretty much, and all of the scrolls are in the hub world. Still, the fact that we have scrolls in the regular levels in Raiders raises some eyebrows. But the reason these sampler dungeons are so linear is because their whole purpose is to teach you how the gadgets work. I don't think I've said yet, but every tank in the game has a certain set of gadgets that work with it. The tactical tank, for example, has a turret, the shot pot, while the power tank has something called the splatchet, which is basically a hatchet that does a wide sweeping motion, does a lot of damage all at once, while the speed tank has a lot of gadgets that offer mobility. That one starts out with the blast boot, which launches you forward in the air and slams down your boot on the ground to an explosion. Every single sampler dungeon is focused on a specific mechanic. Sometimes it's not explicitly a gadget, but always to teach you something about how a certain mechanic works. And to fulfill the purpose of teaching you a mechanic well, that will often incidentally involve good level design. Not all the samplers are great though. Bento Box was terrible. I don't even know what mechanic that was teaching anyway. But any with the Splatchet or the Booyah Rang, those gadgets are intuitive and complex, so I think the developers had as much fun making that as I enjoyed playing those. Any samplers with the speed gear was good, and since those were all about movement, some of those samplers even had shortcuts. To round out my opinions, power gear was a mixed bag. I didn't like the punching ones too much, but I did like the tactical samplers. Though you have to like puzzles because it was a lot less platforming and a lot more what is the precise angle that will splat all the balloons at once, stuff like that. Now, there are a couple endgame samplers, and they do push the mechanics beyond the basics, but they're all combat-based. The speed one you could argue is more platforming, but you could have done a more athletic obstacle course. Instead, that sampler is focused on popping a bunch of balloons in a time limit. So I would say that's more combat-focused, at least more combat-focused than it could have been. The point being, we do get some stages in the game that are intricate, intentional, solid platforming, the samplers. But even the samplers don't push the platforming to its full potential. Why is that? And it's not just the platforming, all kinds of level design is off in this game, like the aforementioned compass and scrolls. And it's not just because the salmonids are weirdos, which they are. A large sum of the levels in this game are dens, and these are one-floor dungeons focused around a specific salmonid enemy. They all have a unique layout, but some of them are off. The Silken Den is probably the best example. It's like a waffle 3x3 grid, but you don't even use a whole 1/3 of the stage, and that's because the spawn vents are in the other 2/3. So it's not like you can't use 1/3 of the stage. It's actually a pretty good safe space where you can get away from all the action if you need a break for a second. But the thing about this den is the signature salmonid is the smoker. The smoker does not move. It picks a spot and then it just shoots gas at you. And you're on a time limit, so the only way you're finishing this stage is by getting up in the smoker's face and taking them out. Staying in that safe third is the worst strategy. There's no point, especially because the smoker's gas protects other salmonids. You kinda want to rush the smoker in general. The only other salmonids that are higher priority are probably flyfish or stinger. So why is this the smoker den? Why couldn't we pick any other salmonid where we might actually use this other 1/3 of the stage that otherwise has practically zero purpose? Go on, ask anyone who's beaten this stage if they've ever used the 1/3 you start on beyond the first 5 seconds to get over to where the smokers are. I'm guessing no one's done it. And then there's the almond den, which is the only den that's focused on platforming, and it's my least favorite in the whole game. My feelings aside, the problem is it's just a puzzle. It is one of those obstacle courses I was talking about, but there are no enemies leading up to the end of that course. You just figure out how to get to the end within the time limit, and there's a couple enemies there you just take out and it's over. Why aren't we weaving the combat with the platforming together? I'll never get it. Why isn't there a den with minimal ground and a bunch of spring stalks, and all the salmonids are flying? So you're in the air the entire time taking out guys by floating around. That would be a fun subversion on the standard fare, but the game never does it. And just where are dens with verticality in the first place? Most we ever get is an overhead grate or a couple of steps. I would imagine it has something to do with the salmonid AI, but there's gotta be a way to work around it, or at least just use salmonids that won't be cheesed by such a thing. But regardless, something weird's going on here, right? Why does our platforming and exploration have issues? Well, I think the samplers hinted at the answer earlier. The almond den is an anomaly. It's pretty easy to cheese this one, and I think the developers thought that was funny, and also, since you can finish it in under 30 seconds, they thought it was good to have a level that you can grind for materials. But everything else in the game is focused on combat. The game is doing everything it can to make the game's combat as frictionless as possible. That's why the samplers are teaching you how to use gadgets, because the better you get with gadgets, the better you'll be at combat. Another piece of this puzzle, in prior Splatoon games, salmonids had dedicated weaknesses. The steelhead was invulnerable except for the bomb on his head. The drizzler took no damage when under his umbrella, and the flyfish could only get damaged by lobbing bombs into the little missile thing. That's not a thing anymore. The flyfish is comically easier. You just shoot his silly little face. And though the drizzler and steelhead still have the same weakness, they aren't invulnerable anymore. Salmon Run played more like a puzzler, and Raiders plays more like a shmup. The goal of Salmon Run in the previous games is to get golden eggs. It was a huge part of a run. When you defeat the salmonids, they drop golden eggs, and you don't get credit until those golden eggs are safely inside the basket. You had to balance defeating salmon and ferrying eggs back into the basket. Part of the calculus was maybe we bait the salmon closer to the center so the golden eggs drop right next to the basket. But since salmonids were still a threat, you had to balance this. Some salmonid needed to be taken out as quickly as possible, but others that were lower threat level could be baited in where it's a lot easier. But probably the most incriminating evidence is that there's no longer the snatcher. The snatcher would meander in and take back the golden eggs. In Splatoon Raiders, boss salmonids still drop a mandatory item, Mega Power Eggs. You need enough Mega Power Eggs to beat the current floor, but there's no snatcher that will fly in and steal back those Power Eggs. In fact, they don't even despawn, and you can even use gadgets to pick up eggs for you. They clearly want Power Egg pickup to be part of your calculus, but the focus of the game is defeating salmonids first. That is the primary objective, and then you can go pick up the eggs when you have a chance. Why is the puzzle side of things getting sidelined? Why are all the secrets barely secrets? Why is there always an invulnerable bot fighting alongside you? These are all conscious decisions. I think it's all in service of one specific thing: reducing friction. You know, getting trapped in enemy ink is normally a death sentence in Splatoon. If you find yourself in a bad position in Salmon Run, there's usually no escape. But many of the different gadgets you can equip in Raiders can immediately get you out of a bind. There's no ink requirement, there's just a cooldown, they activate instantly, and it doesn't matter if you're in enemy ink or there's a giant salmonid wall in your face, the Flywire will send you flying and nothing can interrupt that animation. At least it hasn't happened to me yet. Raiders will still let you fail, but not for annoying reasons like you didn't get enough golden eggs into a basket. I imagine that the team at Nintendo examined Salmon Run for any hard stops. If you didn't like any of the weapons in rotation, you just can't play. You systematically splat every salmonid on the map with extreme efficiency, but no one's good at the golden egg minigame, you lose. Trapped on that annoying peninsula and spawning grounds, salmonids enclosing on your position, a flyfish locked on, and you're over the grate? Bye-bye! Raiders still has these moments, but the hard stop is less pronounced. The gadgets and deep cut specials can get you out of most pinches. You just gotta make sure you don't fly directly into another pinch, because everything's got a cooldown. Or maybe just do a bot hop. Float, float away from all your problems. Most of my playthrough, danger or skill wasn't even the issue, it was just the timer, which shifts winning away from a skill wall and puts it instead on your player level, a level wall. Oh, I'm stuck, I guess I'm just not a high enough level to beat this raid yet, and unlike Salmon Run, you can't D-rank. But after all this, you might be wondering, if the level design has issues, and the combat is simplified, and samplers are legitimate samples that you gulp down in one bite, what's even the hook of this game? The grind. This game has an astronomical amount of things to collect. Spiralite shards, power eggs, weapons, gadget parts, materials, skill points, and of course, treasure. Every weapon has subtypes, abilities, and even a tier system. To keep things spoiler-free, I'll just say you really want a 5-star weapon for the endgame. And those don't drop very often. But because raids are so fast-paced and arguably fun, you don't mind that the game drip feeds you 5-star weapons at a snail's pace, and half of the time it's not even a weapon you like. Shred through thousands of salmonids, see what you get, cause you will get something shiny, craft a new perk or upgrade a weapon so you feel stronger, and excitedly pop back in before you realize you gotta do that like 100 more times. It's a really smart gameplay loop, and I think that's why a lot of folks love the game. A grind doesn't matter if you enjoy the grind. It's pretty cathartic to blast through a wave of enemies. Especially stingers, you can go straight to burner, you freak. And because the salmonids still have optimal ways to defeat them, you still have skill expression. If you're good at the game, you beat the missions faster. You still want to target the steelhead in the weak spot. The game just doesn't want you to lose because you got backed into an unfortunate corner. And all of this is to hopefully slide you right into the late game. During my playthrough, the repetitive environments started to get to me. The lack of meaningful challenges and satisfying secrets. If the bosses weren't so hype, I probably would have stopped playing. Stonuva Temple was so good, what a fight. The sound design, chucking that minecart right at its face. It was a perfect balance of intimidating monstrosity and silly salmonid. Anyway, one of the most important upgrades in the game is when you power up a tank for the second time. When you finally manage to do that, your options for build synergy just explode. If you're close to doing so and you're not sure if you want to keep playing the game, definitely unlock that before you make a final call. Similarly, when you finally get a 5-star weapon you like, you get a spike in power that allows you to steamroll the next dozen missions. I mean, that happened to me at least. Might have something to do with me fully upgrading my tank, but that's still a point for endgame. And I was shocked. So one thing this game does is add spicy versions of every mission. The same location, but harder. Yes, that's a low-cost way to increase the game's playtime, but I think the real reason they did that was for the power trip. All those stages I struggled with early on, I came back late game and crushed, even the extra spicy ones. I just hit a stride at some point, and I imagine most players do too. Where exactly that happens probably varies, but I do think mid-game is kinda rough. Yeah, I hit some scaling walls early game, and it wasn't great, but I should admit it's probably because I tried to rush the main story and skip levels. And that's another point for Raiders. The game is very clear when you're pushing up against a tough challenge. An increasingly aggressive warning will flash depending on how far away you are from the target level of the stage. So you're always armed with knowledge to succeed. There's a lot of games that will not pass you this intel ahead of time. So that's a bit of an underrated win for Raiders. Hey buddy, you can do this, but just letting you know you probably should reconsider. Or at least bring out the OP build, right? Another frustration is when you get stuck with a bucket sometimes and you don't like the bucket. Or reverse that, you really do like the bucket, but you can't use it anymore because it's too low of a level. But once again, there's a trade-off. It's not a pure negative. I've tried out weapons I can't stand in PvP. And when you do find a 5-star of your favorite weapon, that's all the more exciting. However, if you burn out, you burn out. Quick aside, Kerma lava flows is the gift that keeps on giving, because the spicy variants of the level increase the difficulty of the salmonids you find. Okay, Captain Obvious, well, the ride rail sections of Kerma lava flows don't get any more difficult when you up the spicy level, even though there are enemies that you fight along the ride rails. Which is just another piece of evidence that the platforming in these levels was a bit of an afterthought. A small nugget to give your brain something to chew on between combat segments. So I think that's the calculus here. We're dropping some of the precision platforming and secretive secrets and puzzling puzzlers because we really want to get you to the end game where Splatoon Raiders is the most fun. And the Ask the Developers for Splatoon Raiders backs this up, by the way. A lot of what I'm saying. I'll have that link in the description. They had a vision and they spec'd everything into that gameplay loop. And it's a fun one. But I only was really feeling it when the full breadth of options was available to me, when I finally got a 5-star weapon I liked, and when I put away those platforming stages. The dens, the multi-layer dungeons, that's where this game's at. But there's another thing this game's at. Does well. We need more games like Splatoon Raiders. And when I say more, I mean more spin-offs. I really miss the portable handheld days, the DS days, the 3DS days, where Nintendo was allowed to make smaller titles experimenting one specific mechanic. Pushmo, Steel Diver Subwars, Box Boy, none of these games would have happened if everything had to be a perfectly polished AAA heavy hitter. And one game every decade is such a risk. 10 years for Pikmin 4. 10 years. 10 years for Nintendo to drop a random feature like suggested Pikmin in caves that sounds innocuous but destroys the strategy and mystery of caves. While on top of that, no cave had any shred of difficulty till endgame. I know caves are controversial, but if you put them in your game, you gotta understand why they work. Caves work when they are challenging gauntlets that test your survival skills, and Pikmin 4 didn't do that for most of the game. And I think the reason is when Nintendo spends so long on a game, their audience has to be as wide as the sea, and that means certain folk get left behind. Difficulty options can help, but aren't great most of the time. Inflating health bars doesn't really solve what hardcore gamers are looking for. Bonanza, for example, was so focused on the open world that challenges and skill set mastery were neglected. They completely fixed that problem with the DLC, but it changed the identity of the game. If you don't like roguelikes, tough luck. We thought Tears of the Kingdom would be more Breath of the Wild with all the issues ironed out. Instead, we got Nintendo betting all in on this contraption building idea. None of these games are bad. But how many years did we wait for such a serious disconnect? We know from the interview that Raiders is a spin-off, and if it is a spin-off that won't delay Splatoon 4 for another 4 years, Splatoon fans completely win out this generation. We get a general audience mainline entry and the wacky combat-focused dungeon delving spin-off. I think Nintendo should make spin-offs with every single one of their big IPs. Key detail though, maintain the same core mechanics with the spin-off. Do a Pikmin 1 spin-off with a new protagonist and new Pikmin, then bring back Olimar and the boys for Pikmin 5. One warning though, cut down on the remakes. I have no interest in playing Pikmin 1 again, but I would be tickled pink to play the same X days to repair your ship, just with a different spin and new areas. So that way, if Pikmin 5 strolls along, and it's all about caves and there's no time limit at all, fans of the first game that really like the time limit have a spin-off that they can enjoy. And people who just want more Pikmin win too. I gotta point out that Louie's Quest and Pikmin Squared is a great example done right, though Nintendo should be able to do completely new areas. I'm glad the devs confirmed that Splatoon Raiders is indeed a spin-off, but even without their confirmation, it seemed pretty obvious to me. It has a far different gameplay loop than mainline Splatoon, but it uses the same mechanical foundation. Less emphasis on that area of control turf wars idea that inspired the first game, but with all the same weapons, squid and ink mechanics. I don't think anyone would call this game uninspired or retreading ground, but the root is still the Splatoon DNA we all got hooked on. Plus your new gameplay style might attract a new audience. For anything I can nitpick about Raiders, the precedent it hopefully sets for spin-offs is exactly what I want. I find it funny just how many small things I can critique about Raiders. I really didn't expect to have this much to say, but I'm feeling quite confident now that it is the mid-game. All those standard stages just hinting at doing more with the mechanics, but never quite reaching the highs that the story mode does in the mainline series, it wore me out. But once the intensity and complexity of the combat showed its face, and the gameplay loop really kicked in, kept me rolling, okay, you got me. And this game has a lot of endgame content. It feeds you well-seasoned salmon until you get sick of it. It's not for everyone, but if it clicks, it's one of Switch 2's best thus far. We might never see a Splatoon dungeon crawler again, so I'm glad they went all out with their idea. I do think we need to do something about mid-game though. It's not just Raiders that has this problem, but I think that's a whole other topic. Seriously though, why are no raids longer than 3 floors for 95% of the game? And Pikmin 4 is similar. What are we doing? Are we that afraid of scaring people away? Can we not do... I don't even know. Something, pacing. I'm sure it has something to do with pacing. But I do think Raiders would have really benefited from a random 10-floor dungeon in the middle of the game. Is that just me? I don't know, you let me know what you think. Which, as a whole... Thank you all for listening. This has been the first ever particular design dive. Feel free to let me know your thoughts on anything. Everything about the format is potentially up in the air at this point. I made a video about my desires to make a podcast, but I had some conflicting ideas. And based on the feedback I got, a clear takeaway was just give it a shot. And I would say this video is the closest thing to my original idea. So if you liked it, let me know and we'll keep doing it. Design Dive can be anything about video games, most likely sticking to one particular game, but if the discussion warrants 2 or 3 simultaneously blended together for an important discussion about gaming, then that's fine too. I just want a series where I can get out my thoughts without having to worry about 100 hours of editing. It's a little bit ridiculous. If you watched that video about my podcast idea, I think what we're going to do is 2 series, essentially. This one where it's just me deep diving on a particular topic, and another more traditional podcast where I have other folks on and we have a conversation. I'm thinking that I want the conversation to be a little bit more open than this video is, where I drilled down on 2 things. Why does Raiders favor combat over secrets and platforming, and why spin-offs are healthy for Nintendo's IPs. But the most important thing is that we wade into the water a little bit and test out the idea with actual examples so you guys can give a simple yay or nay. But of course, you are welcome to go down into the comments and type up a whole write-up if you really want. And any way we can improve this design dive going forward, feel free to let me know. I would greatly appreciate it. Oh yeah, and argument-wise, do you agree with my take, or did I miss something important? Anyway, that's all I have for now. Thanks again for watching or listening. At some point, this will be audio only with the RSS feed, I believe. But just going to try the idea out for a little bit. However, people in the future could be listening to this. All right, bye-bye now. Take care.